Thursdays, nigga.
On a quiet Friday night in Jackson, Mississippi, the world dimmed for a young woman whose light had always shone brightly in the lives of those around her. Destiny Karee Stewart, just 27 years old, had spent her evening doing what she always did, caring for others. She was a dedicated nursing home worker, someone known for her warmth, her kindness, and her willingness to go the extra mile for anyone in need. But as her shift came to a close, so did her life, in a way no one could have imagined. Just outside the Pine Forest Health and Rehabilitation Center, in the stillness of the night, tragedy struck. It was the kind of moment that doesn't come with warning bells or flashing signs. 1 minute, Destiny was leaving work, possibly preparing for a quiet weekend. The next, she was faced with an unimaginable confrontation, one that would become her last. Destiny had known the man standing across from her in that parking lot, 29-year-old Samuel Coleman. We don't know everything about their relationship, but we do know that something between them had been simmering quietly, and that night, it came to a boil. Within seconds, a gun was drawn. One fatal shot rang out. It was over in moments. Destiny was left lying there, a single gunshot to the head. In a final, devastating act, Samuel then turned the gun on himself. A murder-suicide. 2 lives ended within minutes. A young woman taken in the prime of her life, and a man whose pain, intentions, or instability may never fully be understood. By the time police arrived at the scene, it was too late. Officers cordoned off the lot. Blue and red lights painted the cracked pavement in flickers of grief. Crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze as investigators tried to piece together what had happened. And somewhere not far from that parking lot, Destiny's family would soon receive a phone call that would change their lives forever. Word spread quickly. Her co-workers were among the first to respond, many of whom had just seen her hours earlier. Her kindness still fresh in their minds. Her smile still echoing in the halls she once walked. It didn't make sense. How could this have happened? Here at work, in a place where she spent her days healing others. In the days that followed, candles were lit, tributes were posted online, and a GoFundMe campaign was launched to support her grieving family. But nothing could fill the space she left behind. Nothing could prepare her loved ones for the cruel way her story ended. And nothing could undo the silence that followed the last sound of that single gunshot. As investigators combed through evidence, searching for clarity, the community was left with only questions. What led to that moment? Was there a warning? Could anything have been done? The answers weren't just legal. They were emotional, human, deeply personal. Destiny's death didn't just become a headline. It became a mirror to the cracks in how we recognize and respond to emotional danger. And so, we begin here, not just with the facts, but with the way of a life lost. Because Destiny was more than a name in a news report. She was a sister, a daughter, a friend, a caregiver. She deserved safety. She deserved peace. And above all, she deserved to live. This is the story of Destiny Karee Stewart. And as we walk to what happened, why it matters, and what we can all learn from her tragic loss, we ask you to remember, behind every case, behind every statistic, is a life that mattered deeply. Let's honor her by listening closely and by never forgetting her name. Before her name became a headline, Destiny Karee Stewart was simply known as Destiny, a bright, loving young woman whose presence brought warmth wherever she went. At just 27 years old, she had already built a reputation as a compassionate caregiver, working tirelessly at the Pine Forest Health and Rehabilitation Center in Jackson, Mississippi. For many of her patients, Destiny wasn't just a nurse or an aide. She was a source of comfort, a smiling face during hard times, a person who genuinely cared. Destiny's life was anchored in kindness. Her coworkers describe her as the type of person who would step in to help without being asked, who never let a patient feel alone, and who somehow managed to keep her calm even on the most stressful shifts. She had a soft heart but a strong spirit, an inspiring balance for someone working in such an emotionally demanding field. Family and friends remember Destiny as deeply loyal and full of life. Whether it was lending a listening ear after a long day or showing up for someone's birthday with balloons and joy, she made people feel seen. Her laughter was contagious. Her empathy ran deep. And despite the daily heaviness of her job, she always found a way to show love, even on the hardest days. Destiny had dreams beyond her current role. She wanted to grow in her career, perhaps become a registered nurse, and eventually open her own healthcare facility. She often talked about building something bigger, not just for herself, but for her community. She believed that everyone, regardless of background or income, deserved dignity and care. Her personal life, while largely kept private, reflected the same thoughtfulness. She wasn't flashy or dramatic. She moved with grace. Friends knew her as someone who gave people the benefit of the doubt, someone who tried to see the good in everyone, even when it wasn't easy. That gentle faith in others, while beautiful, may also place her closer to danger than anyone realized. Destiny lived a life grounded in service and connection. She wasn't out seeking attention or status. She was doing the quiet work, day after day, of helping people heal, of standing by others in their most vulnerable moments. It's the kind of life that doesn't often make the news, but when it's lost, its absence leaves a gaping hole in the hearts of many. And so when tragedy found Destiny, on a seemingly ordinary night, it didn't just take her life. It stole from everyone who had ever been touched by her light. Her story, now wrapped in sorrow, deserves to be told not just as a case of violence, but as a tribute to who she was and what she stood for. The exact nature of the relationship between Destiny Stewart and Samuel Coleman, the man who ultimately took her life as his own, remains somewhat unclear to the public. Authorities have described the incident as stemming from a domestic situation, which implies a level of personal or intimate involvement, whether they were in a romantic relationship, close friends, or something more complicated. What we do know is that their lives had become intertwined, and something within that connection began to fracture. Destiny was not someone who openly shared the private details of her relationships. Like many people who cared deeply for others, she often held her own challenges quietly. It's possible that she hoped things would improve, or that whatever tension existed between her and Samuel might resolve with time. Sometimes, people remain in difficult dynamics out of love, out of loyalty, or out of fear of confrontation. Destiny may have simply been trying to navigate the situation the best she could. Those close to her say she didn't often talk about drama or conflict. She preferred peace. She was someone who tried to avoid chaos, not invite it. But even the most composed and gentle spirits can find themselves caught in the emotional weight of another person's instability. There are signs, sometimes subtle, that something isn't right, but we often don't recognize them until it's too late.
Jackson nursing home employee is killed when police say her boyfriend went to her job and confronted her. No one inside that facility was harmed. 3 on your side's Rosalind Anderson has the latest from Jackson Police. Rosalind?
2 families are now left devastated after Jackson Police responded to gunfire at the Forest Avenue nursing home. According to Jackson Police, the murder-suicide occurred around midnight Friday at Pine Forest Health and Rehabilitation. 20-year-old Destiny Deja Stewart was shot once in the head in the parking lot of the nursing home. Police say 29-year-old Samuel Coleman argued with Stewart before opening fire. Investigators say Coleman then went to his car and shot himself. Stewart was a certified nursing assistant at the facility. Both were transported to a local hospital where they were taken off life support Saturday.
Whatever the situation was, if she wanted to move on with her life or if she wanted to end the relationship with him, that should have been the end of it. It should not have been a situation where you got to take her life and then take your life, because now both families are destroyed forever here in the city of Jackson.
Our repeated calls to Pine Forest administration for comment have not been returned. JPD offers conflict resolution training each Monday at 6 p.m.
Samuel Coleman was 29, not much older than Destiny. From the outside, there may have been little cause for alarm. He wasn't known publicly for violence, and there was no immediate history of threats. But something was clearly brewing beneath the surface, something powerful enough to turn fatal in a single night. Whether it was jealousy, anger, a sense of control slipping away, or emotional desperation, the events of that Friday night point to unresolved pain that spiraled into violence. Tragically, this pattern is not uncommon. Women, especially black women, are often affected by intimate partner violence that escalates quickly and unexpectedly. A relationship that seems calm can, behind closed doors, be filled with subtle fear, coercion, or pressure. And too often, society overlooks the danger until it turns deadly. Destiny's story is another painful reminder of how complicated, layered, and dangerous some relationships can be. It's important to remember that Destiny may have trusted Samuel. She may have cared for him, or believed that whatever issues they faced were manageable. That's what makes stories like this so heartbreaking. When love and harm coexist in the same space, the lines can become blurred. But no one ever deserves to be hurt by someone they know, someone they may have once cared about. As we reflect on their relationship, we don't need to place blame on Destiny for staying connected to Samuel in any way. Instead, we must recognize how difficult it can be to see danger coming when it wears a mask of familiarity. Destiny's story isn't just about a relationship gone wrong. It's about how silence, fear, and emotional instability can hide beneath even the most composed surfaces. It was a quiet Friday evening on March 22nd, 2024, and Destiny Karee Stewart had just finished a shift at Pine Forest Health and Rehabilitation Center in Jackson, Mississippi. Like so many nights before, she spent her time caring for the elderly and vulnerable, offering them her calm voice, her steady hands, and her deeply rooted compassion. It was a kind of work that left people exhausted but fulfilled, something Destiny had mastered over the years. As her shift ended, she likely looked forward to resting or maybe catching up with loved ones. There was no sign that the night would take such a devastating turn. At around 10:30 p.m., Destiny stepped into the cool night air. The parking lot was dimly lit and mostly quiet. It should have been an ordinary end to another selfless day. But somewhere in that parking lot was Samuel Coleman, a man she knew, a man who was about to make an irreversible choice. What led him there that night is still a matter of investigation, but what's clear is that he wasn't there for a conversation. He was carrying a gun. Whether they argued or if he approached her silently, no one can say for certain. There were no public witnesses, no crowd to intervene, only the cold night, a dark lot, and the echo of a confrontation that escalated within moments. What we know is that in that brief, tragic encounter, Samuel pulled out a firearm and shot Destiny once in the head, taking her life instantly. The impact of that moment cannot be overstated. Destiny, a young woman who had just spent her night helping others, was gunned down in the very parking lot of her workplace. A space she likely viewed as safe, familiar, even routine, was transformed into a scene of unspeakable violence. And then, in what appeared to be an act of finality or regret, Samuel walked back to his vehicle and turned the gun on himself, and his own life just moments later. By the time emergency responders arrived, both Destiny and Samuel were gone. Jackson police secured the scene, and investigators began piecing together what had happened. But the damage was already done. 2 lives lost, one taken by violence, the other by what could only be described as a tragic collapse of reason, restraint, and humanity. News of the murder-suicide spread quickly. Destiny's co-workers, many of whom had just said goodbye to her hours earlier, were the first to hear the devastating news. For them, the horror wasn't abstract. It was personal. They had walked those same hallways with her, shared lunch breaks, supported each other through difficult shifts. Now, her death cast a heavy, unshakable silence over the place she once brought so much light. Family and friends were stunned. There had been no public warning, no indication that such a senseless act was looming. And for Destiny's loved ones, the news came like a blow, one that knocked the air out of their lungs and shattered any sense of normalcy they'd known. Their beautiful daughter, sister, and friend was gone, and the only answer offered was that it stemmed from a domestic dispute. In that parking lot, where life and death met in the span of minutes, the world changed forever for everyone who knew Destiny. The pavement was marked with more than just police tape and evidence tags. It held the weight of grief, of loss, and of all the questions that would never be fully answered. Why here? Why her? Why now? The following morning, as the sun rose over Jackson, the community began to mourn. Flowers and candles appeared at the nursing home. Messages of disbelief and heartbreak flooded social media. A GoFundMe page was created to help Destiny's family with funeral expenses, and the broader community tried to wrap its arms around the tragedy in whatever way it could. But no amount of money, words, or gestures could fill the void left behind. Destiny's final moments were not a reflection of her life, but they had become a haunting reminder of how quickly a routine evening can turn into something unimaginable. She walked out of work with no idea that she would never make it home. Her story is now a call to all of us to pay attention, to support each other, and to recognize that sometimes the most dangerous moments come not from strangers, but from people we know. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, the quiet parking lot of Pine Forest Health and Rehabilitation Center transformed into a full-scale crime scene. Officers from the Jackson Police Department arrived swiftly, their sirens piercing the silence that had settled after the gunshots. They quickly secured the area, cordoning it off with yellow crime scene tape as lights from squad cars danced against the walls of the nursing home. What had once been a place of care and healing now stood shadowed by the grim weight of sudden loss. Inside the tape perimeter, the reality was heartbreaking. Destiny Stewart's body was found near the entrance of the parking lot, lifeless, still dressed in her work scrubs. A few feet away, Samuel Coleman's body lay near his car, the weapon used in both shootings found nearby. Investigators confirmed early on what many had already feared. It was a murder-suicide, and there would be no suspect to arrest, no trial to prepare for, and no answers from the one person who could have provided them. Detectives began their work methodically, photographing the scene, collecting shell casings, and speaking with any potential witnesses who may have heard or seen something. Surveillance footage from the facility and nearby buildings was also pulled to trace Samuel's movements that evening. Though the attack had taken place in a relatively isolated space, authorities hoped that digital evidence would shed light on what led up to that moment. One of the key early steps in the investigation was piecing together the nature of the relationship between Destiny and Samuel. Statements from co-workers and friends revealed that they were known to one another, though opinions varied on how close they truly were. There were no prior domestic violence reports filed publicly between them, no restraining orders, no formal complaints. But investigators were careful not to mistake silence for peace. Detectives also began combing through Destiny's and Samuel's phones, searching for messages, calls, or social media activity that could point to an argument, a threat, or any other indication of rising tension. These digital footprints often tell the hidden parts of the story. Conversations that were never shared aloud, fears unspoken, signs that might have been overlooked. Autopsies were performed in the days following their deaths. Destiny's cause of death was ruled a single gunshot wound to the head, while Samuel's were consistent with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Both deaths were ruled homicides and suicides, respectively. With this, the case technically closed, but the investigation, emotionally and socially, was far from over. For the officers and first responders, it was a scene that stayed with them. Many had daughters, sisters, or friends who worked in healthcare. Seeing Destiny's body, knowing she just finished a long shift helping others, struck a chord. These weren't faceless statistics. They were two lives, two human beings, lost in a moment of irreversible violence. The nursing home administration cooperated fully with investigators and offered counseling services to their staff. Colleagues of Destiny were offered time off, trauma care, and space to grieve. Some described feeling scared to return to work. Others said they would never forget the sight of the flashing lights in the parking lot, where they usually said their goodbyes after a long shift. Though there was no arrest to be made, the Jackson Police Department released a public statement expressing condolences to Destiny's family and reaffirming the tragedy as a matter of domestic violence. They urged the community to reach out for help if they were experiencing conflict, emphasizing that resources are available, even if you don't feel like you're in immediate danger. In the end, the investigation provided facts, but not peace. The loss was still fresh, the wound still open. While detectives did their jobs with professionalism and care, the emotional investigation, the one that asked why, was left to Destiny's loved ones, her co-workers, and the community she had touched. They were left to sit with the truth that sometimes even the people we know can carry silent storms inside them, and that recognizing those storms might be the first step to preventing the next tragedy. In most tragic cases involving the loss of life, a legal trial offers families a chance to face the accused, hear the evidence presented, and hopefully receive justice through the court system. But in Destiny Karee Stewart's case, no courtroom proceedings ever took place. The moment Samuel Coleman turned a gun on himself after killing Destiny, he ended not only 2 lives, but also any possibility of formal accountability through the justice system. The lack of a legal trial left Destiny's loved ones in a painful and complicated space. There would be no opportunity to ask Samuel why he did what he did. No cross-examinations, no jury verdict, no moment of legal reckoning. For many grieving families, a trial, while emotionally draining, can offer a form of closure. But here, they were left with silence. A quiet that feels heavier because it carries all the questions that will never be answered. The official findings of the Jackson Police Department and the medical examiner were clear. The incident was ruled a murder-suicide, and with the sole suspect deceased, the criminal investigation was formally closed. While that marked the end of the police file, it did not close the emotional case that lingered for Destiny's family, friends, and community. Some might ask, is justice served if there's no one to hold accountable? That's a difficult question to answer. In one sense, the danger is gone. Samuel Coleman cannot hurt anyone else. But justice is not always about punishment. Sometimes it's about acknowledgement, about recognizing that Destiny's life was stolen unjustly, and that the systems meant to protect people in toxic or dangerous relationships must do better moving forward. In the wake of the tragedy, local organizations and advocates in Jackson quietly began discussions about mental health services, conflict de-escalation resources, and domestic violence prevention. It wasn't a courtroom win, but it was an effort to honor Destiny by trying to ensure her story isn't repeated. Legal closure may not have come through a judge's gavel, but it found its place in the community's renewed commitment to awareness and prevention. For Destiny's loved ones, there is no verdict that can undo what was done, but many have chosen to honor her memory by focusing on healing, by sharing her story, and by continuing to remind others that one act of violence can destroy countless lives. Their strength is a quiet form of justice, a refusal to let her life be reduced to just a case file or a headline. Ultimately, Destiny Stewart deserved more than what happened to her. She deserved protection, peace, and a future. And while the legal system may not have had a role to play after her passing, society still does. We all do, through remembrance, advocacy, and listening to the silent cries of those in danger. We have the power to speak where the law is silent and act where the courts cannot. The loss of Destiny Karee Stewart was felt like a deep, sudden chill across the community she served so faithfully. In the days following her tragic death, her absence was not just noticed, it was profoundly mourned. At Pine Forest Health and Rehabilitation Center, her co-workers moved quietly through the halls, each shift haunted by the memory of a friend who had once filled the space with kindness and warmth. For many of her patients, especially the elderly she cared for with such tenderness, the news brought tears and confusion. How could the gentle voice that once reassured them now be gone forever? Her family was shattered. The shock of her death was overwhelming, but the manner in which she was taken made the grief almost unbearable. Destiny wasn't sick. She hadn't been in an accident. She was killed, taken from them, by someone who once stood close enough to reach her. Her family had to process not only the finality of death, but the trauma of violence. They had to answer impossible questions from children, arrange funeral plans they never thought they'd need, and somehow begin healing in a world that no longer included her. Friends flooded social media with tributes, photos, memories, and prayers. Some shared moments from high school. Others recounted her determination to succeed and her relentless compassion for others. Over and over again, people said the same thing. Destiny didn't deserve this. She was working hard, building a life, staying out of trouble, and yet, in a cruel twist of fate, she became the victim of something so senseless it left everyone grasping for meaning. The broader Jackson community responded with support. A GoFundMe was launched to help cover funeral costs, and donations poured in from those who knew her and those who didn't. Local churches held prayer vigils. Nurses and healthcare workers across the region wore ribbons in her memory, many posting messages like, "This could have been any one of us." Destiny's story resonated deeply because she represented so many women, working hard, loving deeply, and navigating relationships that sometimes held unseen dangers. What makes Destiny's story so heartbreaking is how ordinary the moment was. She wasn't in the middle of a high-risk situation. She wasn't on vacation or somewhere unfamiliar. She was simply leaving work. And that very ordinariness is what terrified so many people. It reminded them that domestic violence doesn't always wait for a confrontation behind closed doors. It can appear in parking lots, on lunch breaks, in public, when no one expects it. Her death sparked quiet conversations across Mississippi and beyond. People began checking in on friends they hadn't heard from in a while, asking loved ones deeper questions about their relationships, and paying closer attention to red flags they may have ignored before. Destiny, in death, opened the door for others to seek safety in life. That is a gift no one should have to give, but one her community holds close. Destiny Stewart may be gone, but her impact lingers in every patient she helped, every co-worker she comforted, every family member she embraced. Her story reminds us to protect one another, to listen more closely, and to love more fiercely. And in keeping her memory alive, we create space for healing, action, and, hopefully, change. Destiny Karee Stewart's tragic death underscores a deeper and often quiet crisis in communities everywhere. Domestic abuse doesn't always look how we expect it to. It doesn't always show up as visible bruises or screaming matches. Sometimes it's subtle. It hides in text messages that seem possessive but caring, in unspoken fears of upsetting a partner, or in relationships where one person slowly loses their voice while trying to preserve peace. Destiny's story is a heartbreaking reminder that emotional danger can wear a calm face and escalate without warning. Domestic abuse, especially in Black communities, is often underreported and misunderstood. Cultural stigmas, distrust of law enforcement, and fear of being judged keep many women silent. Even when victims see warning signs, they may feel pressure to make it work, or fear that speaking up could lead to retaliation. For women like Destiny, young, hardworking, and deeply giving, the idea of walking away may feel like failure, when in reality, it's a brave act of survival. Many abusers don't show their violent tendencies at the beginning of a relationship. It builds gradually, cloaked in charm and apologies. By the time threats or controlling behaviors emerge, victims may feel emotionally trapped. That's why it's so crucial for communities to talk about healthy relationship boundaries, consent, and emotional safety, not just physical harm. We need to normalize checking in when something feels off and offering support without judgment. Destiny's case also highlights the need for more accessible resources and early intervention programs. Shelters, hotlines, and counseling services must be better funded, more visible, and culturally sensitive. Victims need options that feel safe, not shameful. They need to know that asking for help won't be met with blame or disbelief, but with open arms and real solutions. Had Samuel Coleman shown signs of emotional instability or aggression in private, would Destiny have had a safe outlet to talk about it? We may never know. There's also an important lesson here about how we support survivors before they become statistics. Friends, co-workers, and even strangers should feel empowered to speak up when something doesn't sit right. Asking, "Are you okay?" or "Do you feel safe?" might seem small, but it could open a door for someone in danger to seek help. Being a safe space for someone doesn't mean having all the answers. It means showing up with compassion. Consistently. Education also plays a critical role. We need to teach young people early on about emotional regulation, mutual respect, and what healthy love actually looks like. We should be honest about the red flags of control, possessiveness, and isolation. Prevention doesn't start at the point of violence. It starts long before that, with conversations at kitchen tables, in classrooms, and through the media we consume. Destiny didn't choose this ending, but her story can be a catalyst for others to recognize the signs of danger, to speak up when it's hard, and to reach out before things escalate. We owe it to her, and to the countless others we've lost, to keep having these conversations, because awareness saves lives, and prevention, when rooted in love and truth, is the greatest justice we can offer. Today, Destiny Karee Stewart's case remains technically closed. The police investigation concluded with the confirmation that the incident was a murder-suicide. There is no ongoing legal pursuit because the perpetrator, Samuel Coleman, is no longer alive. In the eyes of the law, the file may be complete, but for Destiny's loved ones, her community, and everyone touched by her story, the impact continues to ripple outward. Her memory lives on the hearts of those she served, laughed with, and loved. Since the tragedy, Destiny's family has focused on grieving, remembering, and slowly healing. They've leaned on their faith on each other and on the support community that showed up with food, flowers, prayers, and messages of solidarity. Her name has become more than a memory. It's a quiet mission to speak up about domestic violence, especially when it hides behind silence and familiarity. They want people to know that Destiny's life mattered and that her death must not be in vain. Across Jackson and beyond, people are beginning to ask deeper questions. Community leaders, pastors, healthcare workers, and neighbors are talking more openly about mental health, relationship red flags, and emotional abuse. Some local churches have hosted workshops on healthy relationships and conflict resolution. Others have offered safe spaces for people, especially women, to speak their truth. These actions may seem small, but they build a foundation of awareness, and that awareness saves lives. We are called now to do more than just feel sad. Destiny's story calls us to act. Check in on your friends, especially the strong ones. Listen closely when someone says they're uncomfortable in a relationship. Don't brush off controlling behavior as jealousy or passion. Advocate for better resources in your area. Support shelters. Donate to mental health services. And demand policies that protect victims and hold abusers accountable. Everyone has a role to play in prevention. If you or someone you know is in an unsafe situation, please remember, help exists. There are hotlines, shelters, and trained advocates who will listen and act without judgment. You are never alone. Even when it feels overwhelming, even when the path forward seems uncertain, there's always hope. Destiny didn't get the chance to escape, but others can and must. Let her story be the warning that opens a door for someone else's rescue. This tragedy also reminds us of the importance of safe workplaces. Employers, especially in healthcare settings, should consider offering resources like emotional wellness checks, domestic violence education, and connections to crisis support. No one should walk out of their place of work fearing what's waiting in the dark. Destiny Karee Stewart deserves so much more: a future, peace, safety. And while we cannot rewrite what happened, we can honor her by ensuring that her life wasn't lost without purpose. Let us carry her name forward, not just as a memory, but as a call to protect, to listen, and to love each other better. Because the work of change begins with us. All of us. Destiny Karee Stewart's story is one that touches the soul, not because of how her life ended, but because of how beautifully she lived it. She was a caregiver, a nurturer, a light in the lives of everyone she touched. Her warmth, her kindness, and her quiet strength were the kind of qualities that don't always make headlines, but they leave lasting legacies. Today, we remember Destiny not just for the tragedy that took her away, but for the love she poured into the world while she was here. As we close this episode, we hold space for Destiny's family, friends, and co-workers. We honor their grief, their courage, and their strength in sharing her story with us. We also acknowledge the countless other women whose names we may never know, those who are still suffering in silence, and those we've already lost. Let Destiny's story remind us all that compassion, awareness, and action can make a difference. That by standing up for one another, we can protect lives before they are taken. If Destiny's story moved you, even just a little, we ask that you take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Lat True Crime Stories for more heartfelt, real-life stories like this one. These stories deserve to be told, not for the sake of sensationalism, but to bring light to issues that too often remain hidden in the dark. Every like, every comment, and every share helps spread awareness and keeps Destiny's name alive. It tells the world that her life mattered, and that we refuse to let her be forgotten. It also helps us continue to create more content that uplifts victims, educates communities, and encourages important conversations around love, safety, and healing. Thank you for spending this time with us, for bearing witness to Destiny's life and legacy. Until next time, please stay safe, stay kind, and remember, you never know who might need your support. Let's keep watching out for each other.